when there were no GPS, when there were no Google Maps. So during those times, you decided to go on a road trip.
There is something deep down burning inside you to do it. At that time, you don't look at the risk and other factors. And sometimes that's why you win. Like in Baluchistan, I was taken at a gunpoint when I was passing through the opium farm. When this article was featured in the Gulf News, and when Shell stepped in to sponsor my trip. And after that, things started falling in.
Story. What was that one piece scratchless story around this trip?
So I had security guards with me, sometimes in my car, sometimes an escort vehicle also with. I was detained on the Indian border. The IG of Amritsar was contacted and they came to the border. They called sniffer dogs to do a thorough check on my car, and only after 36 hours, after long interrogation, I was released, finding that it was genuine and there was nothing. Pepsi was one of the company who offered to sponsor, but they had a condition that I would have to do a press conference in all the cities in Pakistan, India, everywhere. It was not easy for me to get a Pakistan visa, and it was recommended that I complete this trip maintaining a very low profile, and therefore I did not accept their sponsorship.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Aysha, and I'm so excited to have each one of you on this incredible journey ahead with real stories, real power, and real purpose. On this show, we get phenomenal people who share their stories of transformation, resilience, and self-discovery. These wonderful people have turned their pain into purpose, their challenges into growth, and I'm sure listening to these conversations, you'll definitely be inspired to be the best version of yourself. Let me introduce to my very first guest on this show, Peenesh Sanghvi, the unstoppable Himalayan guy. I'll tell you in a while why I tagged him the Himalayan guy, but let me share an interesting fact about him. He's the only Indian to drive from Dubai to India via road. Isn't it cool? Interestingly, he also has helped people to get released from the jail and received royal pardon from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, ruler of Dubai. Isn't that amazing? Well, the reason why I have tagged him the Himalayan guy, it's because that's where he feels it's his real home, a safe place to breathe, to reset, and to reclaim his life back. It's my honor to have him on my very first show.
Thank you, Aysha, for such a splendid introduction. And it's a privilege for me to be your first guest, a title which I know I will always own it, no matter how many more guests you have on this podcast.
For sure. You'll always be remembered. The first ones are always remembered.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So let's rewind back to the time when there were no GPS, when there were no Google Maps. So during those times, you decided to go on a road trip from Dubai to India. What made you take that journey?
Yes, Aysha. So this is nothing short of being a very crazy act. Now, when I look back, I also wonder, how did I do it? But I believe sometimes when you are single-mindedly focused on doing something and there is something deep down burning inside you to do it, at that time you don't look at the risk and other factors. And sometimes that's why you win. Because not always, I'm saying, there were risks. I did go through difficult time, but as God may, have it, I still managed to overcome that. And yeah, I was successful in completing that trip, and I feel so glad that I was the first Indian to drive from here to from Dubai to India by road. In the times when there were no GPS, mobile phone was a very rare thing, and that too in a sports car which had a very low clearance, driving through terrain of Pakistan Baluchistan, where the roads were also, not meant for low clearance cars.
Was that the car you end up selling before going to your mountain trip?
No, so the car which I sold now was my Mercedes car, but this I'm talking about many years ago in
Okay.
1996.
Okay. Oh, sports car.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I believe like sports car going on such trip, I'm sure you would have faced a lot of challenges on the road in terms of bumpy roads. Like it wasn't, I'm sure the trip that wasn't that easy what you thought of.
Well, not just the physical bumpy road, but the entire trip was bumpy, considering the places that I was visiting. Like in Baluchistan, I was taken at a gunpoint when I was passing through the opium farms. And when I look back, I mean, it was nothing less than a miracle how I survived. But it wasn't easy. Getting a visa for Pakistan, again, was super bumpy. But after
Yeah.
months of effort, it happened. And it happened in very strange manners. And Gulf News had covered this trip, and things started moving when this article was featured in the Gulf News, and when Shell stepped in to sponsor my trip. And after that, things started falling in place.
Did you ever thought of like turning back? I'm sure you had faced numerous challenges during this road trip, go back to Dubai.
So there were several times such moments.
Uh-huh.
But the reason why I did this, if you look at that reason, there was no way that I was going to leave it halfway or turn back. So, Aysha, I had been fond of driving at a very early age, but we never had a car. My
Okay.
father could have afforded to have a car,
Uh-huh.
but somehow he couldn't understand my desire to fulfill that dream. So that desire was always buried in. When I came to Dubai and I looked at all the fancy cars there, and when I had taken up a job, the first thing was to own a car and drive it there. I was already driving in Dubai, but that was not sufficient. So I wanted to drive it back to India and show it to my father. I mean, it has been 30 years.
That was a spark in you that led you.
It did.
That
and
looks
and
like
at
the
that
real
time,
reason.
So that was 30 years. I have never spoken about the real reason for doing this trip, but it has always been buried inside. But for some reason, when we decided to do this podcast, and when I was in the Himalayas, I met one Russian lady who was very, very advanced meditator. And when she came to know about some of the things that I had gone through or was doing, and she said that this story should come out in the open.
Okay.
Not just for myself, but it would inspire others. So this was about my meditation story and the struggle, how I was trying to reclaim my life. And when we decided to do this podcast, I thought that yes, not just this, but all the stories should come out. So this is the first time that I'm revealing the real reason why I went on the trip, and it is to fulfill that dream, not just to fulfill, but to prove it.
To your father.
Yes, to my father, that even if he could have afforded to buy a car, that would have helped me, fulfill those dreams, those wishes. But because he did not, so that desire was so buried deep down in me that I would not have rested without fulfilling it.
It happens like our childhood dreams. If they are not fulfilled at that stage, they still stay with us. I
Yeah.
would like to know that story. What was that one piece scratchless story around this trip?
So when I was doing this interview with Gulf News, and we were talking about the hazards that I could face what would be the danger, and very obviously one of which would be if something would happen to me, uh, because traveling through Pakistan wasn't
Yeah.
always safe, especially being an Indian. Yeah. Secondly, if I would have met with an accident or so. So these were some of my biggest fear.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I had prayed to God. I prayed to Bhairavji
Mm-hmm.
that if I reached India in one piece and scratchless, not a scratch to me or to my car, then upon reaching India, I would first come and pay my homage to you before I reach my home town, Bombay. And
Oh, wow.
that's how it was. I reached Bombay safely, scratchless, in one piece. And
Wow.
you'll be surprised. 2 days after I reached Bombay, my car had some mechanical failure, and the radiator pipe had burst,
Mm-hmm.
and it could
Oh.
not be repaired. And I was thinking, if this incident had happened, even if I was just 50 kilometers away from Bombay or anywhere, I would have to take this car on a recovery van, which would not be as exciting as reaching my home safely in the car itself. So
Mm.
that is the level of divine support and help that
Wow.
I got from universe or whatever energies that you can think of.
Not just divine intervention, it really reflects the love you have for your cars. Like in your prayers, also, you are like, I want not just me to come back scratchless, but also my car. And that tells like how much passionate you are about driving cars.
That's true. I mean, if only I could say, if cars could speak, then I would say that this is the pain that my car also went through
Aw.
and took care of it, that I would reach home on the wheels and not on the recovery van.
Do you talk to cars?
I do. I do. In fact, when I sold my Mercedes before I went on the Himalayan trip, I cried and I hugged it. And the new
Aw.
owner of the car, he said, so he patted on my back and said, "Don't worry, we will take good care of it." I do believe that they are not just a piece of metal. If you feel it, then it has energy in one or the other form, and sometimes it does help you
Yeah, very
or
true.
and keep you safe.
So your story really tells me that, our dreams don't die with just no. I feel like they begin when somebody says no. Instead of taking it as a rejection, it's actually a redirection. And in your case, your childhood rejection of not owning a car turned into a blessing. It turned into a bold story which you can actually share with the world.
Yeah, that's true. Now I understand it is all based on the DNA of a person, and I'm not talking about the biological DNA, but the soul DNA. In my case, uh, because of my faith in supreme power,
Mm-hmm.
plus my attitude of not giving up so
Yeah,
easily and
yes.
fighting back, and also if I know that this is not a bad thing to do, I would go all out and finish it until I have achieved it. In my case, I think this worked. And now, when I look back,
Mm-hmm.
because it was not fulfilled, I could have achieved this. If I had already fulfilled my desire of driving, let's say from the age of 18,
Yeah,
which is the permissible age,
yeah,
even though I knew how to drive when I was still 14 and a half
yeah.
years old, but I started driving. So after 18 till, let's say, I left India at the age of 23.
Mm,
If I had driven enough for those 5 years in
yeah,
India, then maybe I would have not had this burning desire of driving from Dubai to
yeah. Very
India.
true.
Yeah.
Very true that this rejection turned into a redirection to one bold story
It did.
of yours.
It did.
Yeah,
And this
yeah,
gave me a ray of hope.
yeah.
And I would always tell myself that if I can do this, then I can do that also, and this also, and this also. And this is how I thought of pursuing higher education. And the only single reason why I thought I could still do it was that if I could do this Dubai to India road trip, then I should seriously work on fulfilling my this dream also.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And Aisha, to share some incidents during this trip,
Uh-huh.
this trip was nothing less than miracles. I'll tell you one sense. So, throughout Pakistan, first of all, it was not easy to get a visa for Pakistan, but somehow I managed to get it. And but because of the complexity of it, I was provided security. So I had security guards with me, sometimes in my car, sometimes an escort vehicle also with me. And when we were driving through Baluchistan, we drove the whole night. So we started off at very late night, drove the whole night, and just before twilight, our car stopped at one place. It was dark. I opened the bonnet. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. So we waited for the sun to rise to see. And as we were waiting, there was a four-wheel drive which which passed us. And by the time the sun was up, we looked at the car under the bonnet, and everything seemed normal. And I turned on the ignition. It started. As we drove few kilometers, there was a hump, and just past the hump was a big hole. And fortunately, I managed to turn the car. The front wheel escaped going into the hole, but the rear wheel, half of the wheel went into it. And because it was a sports car, so due to the wide tires, we still managed to be on track. Few kilometers later, again there was a hump, and this time we were more careful, and there was even a bigger hole. And just after that, we see that same four wheel which had crossed us a few minutes ago had turtled down, and there was a body lying outside. My security person, he was not sure if it was real or a trap or something. So I waited a little far until he went to check, and it was a real accident.
Oh.
And we drove 300 kilometers on to Quetta to arrange for medical help for them. But from that place onwards, we were both very quiet driving. And then I broke the silence and asked him that, what do you think? Why our car stopped? And so Riaz was his name. And he said, even I've been thinking that. And I said, if our car had not stopped, then we would have gone over that canal and that hump in the dark. And because of the darkness, we would have not been able to spot that hole, which is what this four-wheel also went through. And because he could not estimate how bad that hole was, he went at the same speed on the second hump as well. And that is when he lost balance and the car turtled up. If it was not for that car stopping on its own, it would have been us lying dead on that.
Yeah. Feels like you were divinely protected.
I was. This thought sends shivers to me, still unexplainable, because I can tell you I didn't do anything fixing any single wire or thing to make it start, but it stopped on its own and it started on its own. This is not just one, but there were several miracles like this.
Like you end up being late, but actually in those times, it's basically, I feel like it's a way God protects us.
It is sometimes meant for our good.
Yeah.
So when I reached India,
Yeah.
so I was overwhelmed.
Wow.
But I was detained on the Indian border.
Why?
And so I didn't know about this because I had met the consul general here in Dubai before leaving and then everything. But I was not aware that there was a pact between India and Pakistan at that time that they would not allow their respective citizens to cross through this border because of the dispute that they had on
Okay.
various issues.
Yeah.
And they were surprised that how did Pakistan allow me to go. So I was detained there. And I was
Oh.
worried about my car. So what would happen? So I parked my car in the zero line, which means that the rear end of the car was in the Pakistan side of it, and the front was on the Indian side. That means no matter what happens, none of the country personnel would take possession of my car, and that way I felt secure that my belongings would be safe. And then they communicated with external affairs and other various agencies. The DIG of Amritsar was contacted, and they came to the border. They called sniffer dogs to do a thorough check on my car, and only after 36 hours, after long interrogation, I was released, finding that it was genuine and there was nothing to worry. However, I could not share about this journey when I reached Bombay, because in those days Maharashtra was ruled by Shiv Sena, the government, and how Bal Thackeray felt about Pakistan in those days.
Yeah.
So I couldn't take that risk. So I tried to keep a very low profile.
So no media coverages.
No media coverage. Z News had offered to cover this trip the moment I entered India,
Okay.
and I refused. So they said, at least let us, we would be happy to cover it when you
yeah.
enter Bombay. So Dahisar is the check post. Dahisar is the name of a suburb
Okay.
from where the Mumbai city limits start.
Okay.
And I changed my entry plan only because I knew that some of their personnel were already there, because they knew the approximate date that I was coming. And I changed my travel plan only so that they don't spot me when I enter Mumbai.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to be low profile
Yes.
and
yeah.
do your job.
And anyways, I
Yeah.
thought I was doing this trip for myself. It was not for media. And because Pepsi was one of the company who offered to sponsor, but they had a condition that I would have to do a press conference in all the cities in Pakistan, India,
Okay.
everywhere, and for a very decent offer of
Okay.
sponsorship. But it was not easy for me to get a Pakistan visa, and it was recommended that I complete this trip maintaining a very low profile, and therefore I did not accept their sponsorship. But Shell was more than helpful. I would like to share this one incident. When I reached Pakistan and I described them about some of the difficulties that I faced, the head office of the Shell Pakistan issued a memo to all their offices at the city level, at the district level, at even small post levels, alongside the route which I was taking, including informing them to let all the truck drivers plying on that route which I was going to let them know that if ever they saw any car or vehicle like this, they should offer support to me, whatever support that I required. And when we were leaving from Multan, we passed through one of the site which was considered very unique because of the confluence of the three rivers there. And just after that, suddenly the weather changed and there was heavy rainfall, heavy winds. And it was difficult for me to drive because, firstly, I was driving a left-hand drive car. Pakistan is a right-hand drive road. So every time when I had to overtake or anything, I would have to come completely out, and the vision was blocked because of the heavy rainfall and the lights from the vehicle from the opposite. And we spotted a Shell truck. So we stopped him, spoke about this, and he to our surprise, he was aware that he was meant to look for a vehicle, but he said just because of zero visibility, he could not recognize us.
Yeah.
But he came to our support and he said that you drive behind me so that you will not face any risk from the vehicles coming from the front. And we drove for some time, and just after that, we found some other truck also. He stopped that truck and asked him to drive behind me. So I was concealed between the
Wow.
two shell trucks,
Wow.
safe from the front and from the back also. And we
Yeah.
drove like a convoy for good 4-6 hours. One of the truck, he had to go to some other town, so he had to leave. But by that time, he had already arranged talking to another truck also. So we found quite a few shell trucks plying on the road, and one by one, everyone was there to offer support. And my whole that drive of 5-6 hours of driving through that storm was so safeful, and this was only because of shell.
So again feels like a divine shield, and that divine shielding around you,
Yes, yes,
supported by shell.
yes. Physically, I was shielded by the two
Yeah.
trucks of shell, but at a spiritual level, yes, it was
Yeah.
divine,
Yeah.
safety thing.
Nice to hear that story.
Yeah, yeah.